It's time for video lesson number 7, boys and girls. And today we're going to be converting decimals and percents to decimals. And this is 1,000 times easier than the last video lesson, I promise. Go ahead and get out your TOC number 7. Of course, that's the yellow sheet of paper. You can make sure you have a pen or pencil to take notes, a highlighter, and this is still part of the non-calculator section. So put your calculators away, because if you're using a calculator when you're not supposed to, it's not helping you because you won't be allowed to use it on the test or quiz. Let's bust out those TOCs and let's get started. Okay, for the first part, we're going to talk about how to turn decimals into percents. This is so easy. Step 1, find the decimal point. That's that little round circle. Now, sometimes there are numbers, you just see numbers and you don't see a decimal point. What do? You add one. The decimal point likes to hide behind the whole numbers. Step 2, move the decimal 2 places to the right. This is the same as multiplying the number times 100. That's important to know. So go ahead and put a little star or circle multiplying by 100 so you don't forget that moving your decimal point 2 places to the right is like multiplying by 100. Then the third step, add the percent sign. And I realize it says percent sign. You don't have to write sign twice. Just percent is fine. All right, let's look at the examples that are off to the right on your paper. So the first example, if I have 9 and I'm trying to make that's like $9 or 9.00, but the decimal point is hiding on that example. So I've added a purple one here. To make it a percent, I have to multiply by 100. So I'm going to move it 2 places. My decimal point's going to move 2 little shuffles to the right. So I'm going to move it 1 place. And because I moved it once, but there's like nothing there, I have to add a 0. So don't forget that I moved it. And then I'm going to add it move it a second time and add another 0. Now, I'm done moving because that's the same as multiplying by 100. Now all I have to do is add my percent sign, and because it's just 900%, I really don't need my decimal anymore, so I can take it away. My second example is very similar. I've got 13.5. I've still got to multiply it by 100 or move my decimal 2 places to the right, So here we go. Move it once over the 5 and jump again, but this time there's nothing there, so I got to add that 0. And then add my percent sign, and I can take my decimal point away, and I'm left with 1,350%. Now, I realize most of the time you're talking about percents that are under 100, but for the sake of this lesson, sometimes you're going to get percents that are over 100%, and that's okay, because in real life, sometimes you'll hear 200% or 300%, and that is real life. It does happen. Let's try some examples. So example number 1, we have 2/10. We're going to multiply 2/10 times 100, move our decimal 2 places to the right, jumps the 2, and then it's going to jump again, but there's nothing there, so I got to add a 0, and then add your percent sign, and I get 20%. Again, I don't have to put my decimal point at the end because it's not needed. Looking at the next example, I have 4.2828, or 4 and 2,828 10,000ths. I'm going to multiply that times 100, move my decimal 2 places, bloop, bloop, and it gets stuck between that 8 and that 2, and I end up with 428.28%. Example number 3. I'm going to multiply 75 hundredths times 100 and move my decimal 2 places. It jumps the 7, jumps the 5, and I get 75%, and I don't need that decimal point anymore. I want you to go ahead and try the next examples on your own. Pause the video, try these 3, try 4, 5, and 6 on your own. No, I lied. Don't try 5. Do 4. and start the video again, see if you got it right. Okay, welcome back. I'm going to show you we jump the 8 and we jump the 7 because we're multiplying by 100, and I end up with 87.5%. And the reason why I did not have you do 5 by yourself is because 5 is a little special. For 5, it has that little bar over the top of the 6. That means that 6 is a repeating decimal. So that means that it's 0.666666666, and then 6 goes on forever. It never stops. It repeats and repeats and repeats. So I'm going to rewrite that decimal so that I have multiple digits. And then I added those 3 dots at the end to show it goes on forever. So I still multiply by 100, just the same as I did before. I'm going to jump the first 6, then I jump the second 6. I don't need those 2 6s afterwards. I only need one of them. But when I write it behind the decimal, this is very important, behind the decimal point, I'm going to add that bar notation. We do not put the bar notation in front of the decimal because we never use bar notation on whole numbers. It is only used on decimals behind the decimal point. So that's showing that that 0.6 repeats, but it's 66.6%. Now let's look at number 6. Go ahead and pause the video, try it on your own, and see what you get. Hopefully you did not cheat and you actually paused the video. You're going to move your decimal point 2 places, and it gets stuck between the last 0 and the 6, and I get 0.6% or 0.6%, and that's okay to have a decimal point in your percent. We have 3 more examples. These, all 3 of them, go ahead and try them on your own, pause the video, and then restart, and we'll see if you got them correct. All right, welcome back. Here we go. Hopefully you did pause the video and you're not cheating. For the 1.49, we're going to move our decimal place 2 times by multiplying by 100, and we get 149%. And for number 8, again, we move it twice, jump the 7, jump the 0, and I end up with 70%. And the last example, I have 4 and 883 thousandths. I move my decimal 2 places to the right, and I get 488.3%. All right, so go ahead and flip your page over. We're going to do the bottom part of page 1 in class because it's a little bit tricky. So instead, we're going to go ahead and talk about the other part. We're going to do the inverse operation now, where we were doing decimals to percents. Now we're going to do percents to decimals, so going backwards. So our first step is going to be find the percent sign and cross it out. We don't need it anymore, and we don't, so once we cross it out, we're going to become a decimal. Second step, you're going to move your decimal 2 places to the left this time. This is the same as instead of multiplying, which is how we became a percent. Now, to go from a percent to a decimal, you do the opposite, which is to divide. So we're going to divide the number by 100. And that's just the reason why we're moving 2 places to the left. You might want to highlight this or put a little star next to it, but if you don't see a decimal point, remember it's hiding at the end of the number. So it's hiding between the last number and the percent sign. So here's a little hint that you're going to want to do. You're going to want to do this with your highlighter. If you're going from a decimal to a percent, think about the alphabet. If you had written your ABCs in order, to go from the decimal to the percent, you go to the right, to the right, to the right. And then if you go from a percent to a decimal, you go to the left, to the left. So that's dividing by 100. So that's an easy way to remember if you need to go to the right or to the left. You can just think of the alphabet and think, okay, if I'm going from the D to the P, for a decimal to a percent, I go to the right. If I'm going from a percent to a decimal, a P to a D, then I go to the left. Let's look at some examples. Okay, first example is 28. First thing we're going to do, get rid of that percent sign. And then there's no decimal there, so I'm going to add it. Just like I added it here in the video, I put a little purple decimal point there. Instead of moving to the right, we're going to go to the left, jump the 8, jump the 2, and then I need to add a 0 in front because you guys like to put those really quick decimal points and we can't really even see them. So if you put that 0 in front, then we know that that's a 0.28 and that decimal point doesn't get lost. Second example is 0.7% or 0.7%. And this is the one everybody misses, and it's always on a test, it's always on your SOL, and everybody gets it wrong. The reason why? They get rid of the percent sign, but guess what they forget? They forget to move their decimal. And they give us a 0.7 as the answer. You still got to move the decimal. Move it to the left, to the left. And if there's nothing in there, you got to add that extra 0 for a placeholder and your 0 in front. So you end up with 7 thousandths as your answer. And remember, moving to the left is the same as dividing by 100. Let's do some more examples. In example number 1, we have 6%. We take the percent sign off, add my decimal point after the 6, and jump to the left twice because we're dividing by 100. And I end up with 0.06 or 6 hundredths. For number 2, again, I already have that decimal. So when you take your percent sign off, your decimal still has to move. It's got to go to the left. Jumps the 0, and then it jumps in empty space. So we got to add another 0, and we end up with 9 10,000ths. Example number 3, take my percent sign off, and again, you still got to move your decimal point. It's got to jump the 2, and it's got to jump the 4 because it's going to the left, same as dividing by 100, and I end up with 3 and 4,279 10,000ths. Go ahead and pause the video, try 4, 5, and 6 on your own, see if you can do it, and then restart the video. Hopefully you paused it and you're not cheating. For number 4, you lose your percent sign, move your decimal 2 places to the left, and I end up with 16 hundredths as my answer. For number 5, drop your percent sign, move your decimal point 2 places to the left, jump the 2, jump the 7, add your 0, and you get 725 thousandths. Number 6, drop your percent sign. Don't forget to move your decimal. Move it 2 places to the left, jump that 0, and that empty space, add another 0, and you end up with a really, really, really big number, or really big, well, technically a really small number. It's 275, like 100 thousandths or 10 millionths or something, I don't know. All right, go ahead and pause the video. Try these next examples on your own. Okay, let's go through these quickly. For 8.8, you would get 0.88 thousandths. For 1%, it becomes 1/100th because you're moving your decimal 2 places. For number 9, you should have gotten 123 10,000ths. For number 10, be careful, that's a repeating decimal, so you had to do 6.66666 and then move your decimal 2 places. You end up with 0.06 repeating. Don't forget that repeating bar to show it's repeating. Number 11, you should have had 0.76589. And then for number 12, you would have 0.000025. All right, let's look at the bottom, because not only do you have to know how to convert fractions, decimals, and percents, but you also have to be able to compare them. So in this case, I'm going to change everything to decimals because decimals I can think of money and it makes sense. Could you also turn them to percents? Sure, but with fractions you don't necessarily want to have to go all the way to that extra step. So for this one, let's change everything to decimals. So for 13, 40% becomes 40 hundredths, and 68 is already a decimal, so I don't have to do anything. Now think of money. Which is more money, 40 cents or 68 cents? And Baby Shark is going to eat the bigger amount of money, which would be 68 cents. Number 14, we have $1.23, can stay there, it's already a decimal. Change 16% into a decimal, it becomes 16 cents or 16 hundredths. And then you have to ask yourself, which is more money? Who's Baby Shark want? Baby Shark wants $1.23. And number 15, last example, take 85%, change it into a decimal. For 0.3, doesn't look like money. So I have to add that extra zero behind it so they're the same length, because students think that if they're shorter, that they're less, but you have to make sure your decimals are the same length by adding zeros, and then it makes more sense. The longer the decimal does not mean the bigger the number necessarily. So in this case, I have 85 cents and 30 cents. Which one's more? Baby Shark wants 85 cents. So it's going to be 85 cents is greater than 30 cents, or 85% is greater than 3/10. All right, now it's time for you to show what you know and press us with your skills.